The city of Rome through the eyes of Marcus Antonius. Several kilometers outside Rome are craters of extinct volcanoes which eventually formed into lakes. Lake Bracciano and Lake Martigiano in the north, and Lake Albano and Lake Nemi in the south. As these lakes are very deep, much of the water which they contain is forced under high pressure through the sides of the crater and collects in subterranean reservoirs formed between the strata of volcano deposits. Part of this water is drained off into the Tiber, but much of it, being unable to flow through the impermeable strata, accumulates near the surface of the ground. So Rome was surrounded by lots of running water. At the end of the Republic, we are aware of three springs in Rome. Two directly in the Forum, we have archaeological evidence for them, and one outside. I don't think any of the springs work today, but they all were active at the time of Marcus's memory of the springs. There are three principal formations visible within the circuit itself. The most important is the volcanic tufa rock, already mentioned, which forms the hills on the left bank of the Tiber. So these hills are the Palatine, Capitoline, and Aventine hills. Is referring to. Sorry, that's Palatine Hill right here, Capitoline Hill right here, and Aventine Hill right here. And they are the leftover deposits of volcanic activity forming volcanic tufa rock. It is certain from the evidence of actual excavations and from the testimony of classical literature that some changes in the altitude of the hills and valleys of the city have taken place since early times. These changes have resulted from the tremendous building activity of the empire on the one hand, and on the other from the falling into the decay of most of the ancient city during the Middle Ages and dumping of rubbish in certain localities during the long periods and the building activity of the Renaissance. So this is what's in Marcus's mind. This here is a model someone made of what they believed Rome looked like in the early Roman kingdom period, which is several hundred years before the end of the Republic. But it is a good general model to go by because the height and cliff faces are more accurate to Marcus's memories. So this here is the Palatine Hill, and this here is the Capitoline Hill. So that was the Palatine here, and that's what this is here. So this is what Marcus has memories of. Capitoline, these are rock structures is what they are. And they're citadels, actually. In all sense, they're citadels. And this is modern day Palatine Hill. So you can kind of see somewhat remnants of that. So this is that's that right there from the same basic angle, right? You got this kind of citadel looking structure. Well, it was much higher in Marcus's memories. And you got rock faces here. So some of this has been kind of distorted, and things have definitely changed over the empire, but they were more pronounced for Marcus in his mind, and they're citadels. And this here is the modern day Capitoline Hill. So that's the Capitoline there, Capitoline Hill here, and this is looking on it directly. This is the Roman Forum. Capitoline Hill also was taller in Marcus's mind. So the point for Marcus, these are citadels, specifically the Palatine and Capitoline Hill. Now, here's the grand connection. In research in the paranormal field, they are aware that volcanic rock on the surface and running groundwater underneath can create highly charged areas of paranormal activity. Here's a research paper using geographic information systems to analyze relationships to explore paranormal occurrences in the continental United States. And it demonstrates rock composition and running water have high correlation with paranormal activity. First off, volcanic tufa rock contains limestone, quartz, and magnetite. It is hypothesized an area with magnetite deposits can generate residual hauntings. In addition, quartz-based rock and rock containing magnetic minerals can have a significant effect on the spatial distribution of magnetic anomalies. It is also hypothesized running water can be used as a source of energy, much like a battery for paranormal activity, because paranormal activity is believed to be electrical in nature, and water is an electrical conductor. Water can conduct paranormal activity. So in Marcus's mind, the top of the Palatine was haunted. In Roman myth, the Lars are spirits. And this haunting of the Palatine was symbolized with an altar to the Lars directly in the corner of the Palatine overlooking the Forum. That's where the altar was. We have historical record of it. Historians don't understand any of the significance of this because they themselves typically aren't into paranormal stuff. They're scientific historians. But it was a haunted location for Marcus. For Marcus, the top of the Palatine and Capitoline were gateways to connect with spirits. And in the memories, Marcus himself has direct contact with spirits on the Palatine Hill, having experiences that would be considered paranormal. So I'm going to keep going. There's a whole bunch of pictures I'll be putting together here. So for Marcus, Rome was a city castle. This is the boundary. This is the remnants of what was once the Servian Wall, and this is its ancient map of what we know the boundary was. So for Marcus, Rome was a city castle. Now, obviously, by modern standards, we don't call it a city. Sorry, we don't call it a castle, and historians simply call it a fortified city. The Servian Wall was it was a 30-foot protective wall surrounding Rome. But for Marcus, the archetype of the castle is what these walls represent. It's a mystical boundary, and everything inside those walls is where life and mythology takes place. The walls were magical, and the gates were magical. The ports of entry were magical. And every community in Italy was like this. Capua was a city castle. Aurelium was a city castle. And inside each was life and a mythology. And every community had a story about how some god founded that location. These stories made up the meaning of their lives. For Marcus, the Pomorium was very real and a magical boundary set by a divining rod that was aware of the water running underneath. And the unique citadels for communication with the gods, the Palatine and the Capitoline, were all heavily fortified with imposing walls. Marcus's mind therefore sees the real Roma as citadel city castles within a larger city castle. So for him, in his mind, there's this city castle with city castles. So the larger Rome is a city castle, and then got city castles inside. And so they have these large imposing walls, and then all the life had sprung out around it. And these large imposing walls all remind him of the Romulus days, of the king days, of the ancient days. So he feels like ancient history is surrounding him when you're in Rome. Very pronounced for Marcus, as it is these magical fortified citadels that make Rome what it is. And these citadel castle walls were archaeology for him. They were remnants of the king days. Marcus knew where the Lupercal cave was, the cave where the story goes, a wolf took care of Romulus and Remus. Regardless, that presently we have archaeological record that humans have been in the area for thousands of years. Marcus believed these origin stories simply because he believed they had archaeology for it. So there was no debate for him that Romulus and Remus clearly found this place, that we have a cave over there. It just makes sense to their minds. Life had sprawled around these old king walls of the citadels. If someone was to draw the Roman Forum at the time of Marcus, these huge imposing walls of the Palatine and Capitoline would be in the background. I even remember the main gate of the Palatine, which had raised slits in the walls on the sides of the gates for defenders to shoot arrows at men ramming the gates, in case of the ancient days. So it still had the fortified look to it. Not that happened in Marcus's time, but the remnants of these existed. So in my first edition of my book, I have a chapter dedicated to Marcus's memories. And I just wrote this out of intuition from what I was seeing in the memories and the visually in the memories. And I had any historical or archaeological record for it. I wrote this. I seen visions of Rome at this time, and it is not the Rome of Hollywood movies. Most of the buildings and temples, though still grand in size, were centuries old at this point and looked like it, with broken walls, exposed brick, and more raw and unkept look. Much of the grander and clean look, we do learn, came after the many building constructions during the reigns of the emperors. And of course, I eventually start reading a book called The Topography of Rome, and it describes exactly this. It matches, everything matched. All that marble look that we associate in TV shows and movies, none of it existed in the mind of Marcus. And it all comes later. And we do have archaeological evidence to back that up. It is difficult to form any definite or exact idea of the appearance of Rome at the Republic. Temples and public buildings were built of opus quatrum of tufa, or of concrete faced with opus incurtum, extremely simple in style and with no pretension of beauty. The dictatorship of Sulla marked the last epoch in the Roman city, in the Republican city, For besides the actual construction and restoration effected at that time, new ideas of archaeological beauty and municipal symmetry were becoming current to be formulated by Caesar and carried out by Augustus and his successors. The last century of the Republic also witnessed the change in building materials, from crude to kiln dried brick with tufa or travertine and the introduction of marble and granite from the east, in which the years to come revolutionized the appearance of the city. So this was it. Marcus, in his whole mind, seeing the forum, seeing the entire city, I do not see these beautiful, magnificent, clean, even temples. Everything's raw. Everything is built and rough and raw. So Roman spirituality and the crossover with the paranormal. It is probably still widely believed that most educated Romans went through the motions of religious ritual without according much credence to what they did. Roman religion is, on this understanding, an empty husk without a kernel. This line from a book, Magical Practice in the Latin West, is the typical perspective some historians take when they view Roman religion. Yet from Marcus's worldview, they couldn't be any more further from the truth. Marcus's full spiritual perspective fully encompassed what we call paranormal experiences, energy, spirits, synchronicities, and the power of will, yet all labeled under the guise of gods, deities, and magic. His perspective imagined the idea that lower gods were actually offspring of the higher gods, a spiritual hierarchy which reflected his own worldview and the importance of genealogy. Many of the beliefs that Romans formed about their spiritual world originated from the Etruscan religion, which Rome assimilated when it conquered Etruria. So, where does the Etruscan religion come from? Well, it starts with an interesting entity called Tagus. This is from Cicero, his book on divination, who was alive at the time of Marcus. They tell us that one day, as the land was being plowed in the territory of the Tarquini, and a deeper furrow than usual was made, suddenly Tagus sprung out of it and addressed the plowman. Tagus, as it is recorded in the works of the Trojans, possessed a visage of a child, but the prudence of a sage. With the plowman, when the plowman was surprised at seeing him, and in his astonishment made a great outcry, a number of people assembled around him, and before long, all the Etrurians came together at the spot. Tagus then discoursed in the presence of an immense crowd, who noted his speech and committed it to writing. The information they derived from this Tagus was the foundation of the science of the soothsayers, and was subsequently improved by the accession of many new facts, all of which confirmed the same principles. We received this record from them. This record is preserved in their sacred books, and from it the augural discipline is deduced. The augural discipline is the interpretation of signs from the sky and seeing portents. So to summarize, appearance of a child, prudence of a sage, appeared to an unassuming and random individual in their society, and he revealed a cosmic view of divinity. So in the UFO field, many gray aliens are reported to appear childlike, and there are many, many accounts of them spouting wisdom, and UFO contact is so often with someone unassuming in society, like me, right? So this is David Grush, the highest ranking UAP whistleblower from the Department of Defense. On Yes Theory, October 1st, 2023.
Do you believe that the phenomenon is the next big, great religion in the world?
Yeah, basically.
The phenomenon has probably already influenced all the other religions already, so it's just, maybe we're looking at the source code.
Yeah, if you're looking at the source code.
We're at the graphic user interface level. It's like IP header, and we're finally getting into the information flow.
He says the phenomenon has influenced all of the religions. So from the record of Tagus, the augural discipline is deduced, learning to read the signs from the sky. So an alien-sounding entity named Tagus showed them how to interpret signs from the sky. And don't forget that CE5 and now the Skywatcher group all call and interact with the phenomenon in the sky. Interesting connection. This is Wigoia. So this is how Marcus calls her. It's Vigoia, but the V's are W's for Marcus. the ancient Etruscan prophetess who was prominent in Marcus's mind. Marcus imagined her to look something like this. She was the author of their sacred books, including the Sibylline books, which were prophesied events about the state, told in religious interpretable codes. The reason Marcus invades Parthia is because the Sibylline books prophesied only a king could beat Parthia, and Marcus was adorned as a king in Egypt, so he thought he was fulfilling the prophecy. Historians don't know that. They know, actually, it's recorded in historical record that only a king can beat Parthia, but no one knows that's what motivates Marcus. She is the author of books that provided information on divining lightning strikes, the sky, property division, and interpreting the innards of sacred sacrificial animals. Her sacred dictation detailed the religiously correct methods of founding cities and shrines, draining fields, formulating laws and ordinances, measuring space, and dividing time. And she initiated the Etruscan people to the arts, rules, and rituals of land marking, and presiding over the observance of respect and preservation of boundaries. This was the way to live life in Marcus's mind. Very raw and close to nature. You carved spaces out that were divine and drew power from the earth. In Marcus's mind, Romans believed they could spiritually draw power from the earth. And that's what these rituals were in fact all about. And Rome was a boundary created by an augur who actually creates it based on these principles. That's why there's a pomorium. And then they believe they're drawing power from it. And it looks like maybe they were. So Marcus grew up with his mom having a book on magic and was fully indoctrinated into the idea that humans could control their fate through spells. His spiritual training for being a senator included how to interpret synchronicities and how to make an altar to a god and how to be empowered or draw from power from a god. As the statues were painted in the ancient world, Marcus was trained to stare into the eyes to draw power from a god on this particular archetype. So if he's at a statue, he's looking at the eyes and he's trying to embody that power, right? In our modern language, gods were archetypes for ancient people which could be invoked through emotion. And he has direct paranormal experiences, interactions with invisible entities that affect his choices that shape history. Marcus did believe the sky was controlled by the gods. He believed this. He didn't question the people before him who thought this way, because it was their wisdom that made up what they knew as a collective. He totally believed in Zeus, the sky god. By the way, Marcus always having the Greek thing, so he's the lover of Greek, and he always, into all the gods were he prefers the Greek names to all the Roman gods. So Jupiter is Zeus, right? So he totally believed in Zeus, the sky god, and he fully believed that his ceremonies and rituals were most important to those who moved or controlled Rome. Senators and generals would focus on Jupiter, but not the average individual. The average person focused on the gods affecting their lives, while Jupiter, Zeus, quote unquote, was the focus of the gods of the state. So there was a distinct, we imagine that, you focus on God and God is your thing. And Romans felt that there's a god for the state that controls the state, and then people who were controlling the state were in touch with that god. Then you go about your normal life and you had different gods that focused on your life. So it's very interesting, all that kind of unraveled in Marcus's mind. Marcus, as an augur himself, he would become an augur, would get energized through a ritual at the statue of Zeus, Jupiter, then come out on the arcs and say, Zeus, show me your signs. And I have a memory of this. And he's out there looking for signs, right? On the actual arcs. And he's looking with paranormal eyes, the same way I might when I'm interacting with my entities outside. Interestingly, from my present perspective, Marcus experiences his higher self through Zeus and through the sky. So he's having spiritual experiences. He believes he's in touch with God when he's at the statue of Zeus. And then he believes he's talking with God when he's out in the sky. So the higher self just said, sure, I come through that way in this life. And it was communicating with him, or gave him feelings. I'm not saying he had any I can't recall big, moments that stuck out, but the bottom line is that he was still experiencing his higher self as Zeus. Now, the connection is very interesting between Tagus, this seeming non-human intelligence, and Wegoia. The Romans had a whole art of watching the sky and interpreting signs, and they were doing this in a highly paranormal atmosphere. And my personal experience with non-human intelligence, I keep saying that they are in the atmosphere in some type of paranormal capacity. The words of which I heard are shadow biome. So here's a brief education. Northrop Grumman, the global aerospace defense and security company, who has long been suspected of being involved in crash retrievals and reverse engineering of UAP, released a research paper speculating that invisible aliens exist in a shadow biosphere on Earth, which can support life. They produced a research paper on it. This is very fitting because the Elder, the main gray alien that I interact with, showed me that they come from a dimension that is like a black shadow. So this word shadow biome, and then it matches what the Elder showed me. And that it was in the atmosphere and crosses over with our atmosphere. So it's all very fascinating. Don't forget, paranormal activity has long been associated with the UFO phenomenon, and we cannot forget journalist Leslie Kean claiming from her investigations, UFO reports are connected to the ghost dimension. So this here is from a YouTube channel called Pink Smoke. Dr. Gary Nolan, head of the Soul Foundation, invested in this fellow's research, who in South Africa is catching these black angel hair-like objects. Well, this is what I see when I call the Elder at nighttime. More than once I have seen similarly looking material appear and disappear, floating or whipping in the sky. Then I'll see an orb, or the appearance of a structured looking craft afterwards. I mentioned this to my friend Ian Halling when I first saw this channel a year ago, that I too had seen this material. I assume it's angel hair, just like the wad of white material I had seen in broad daylight defying gravity. It behaves the same, but it is black at nighttime. I've also caught the Elder on camera, doing paranormal activity in the sky. This is from my video on my YouTube channel, in which I've caught the Elder appearing as a drone, but then produced paranormal-like flashes in the sky as I was filming her.
Look at the noise. Look at the noise. Say hi. Say hi. Say hi.
So I'm just pointing out how easy it is for non-human intelligence to be interacting with humans in the sky, producing signs, producing things, right? So the beings appear to be paranormal entities in the sky. So how fitting is it that a seeming non-human intelligence told them how to interpret the signs in the sky? I'm not saying I have memories of Marcus seeing anything like this, though I do have memories of him auguring, and he was trying to see the paranormal. He's seeing with paranormal eyes. He gets into a state where he tries to see things beyond maybe a veil, right? Exactly as I do when the Elder shows me, she has come out to play. But I do have memories of Marcus having paranormal experiences on top of the Palatine Hill. But nothing stops this invisible species in our atmosphere showing a brief glimmer and materializing in the sky, briefly catching the eye of the augur, but I can't deduce anything from it. But the connection is just very, very interesting.